Good morning, Pilgrim friends and guests, and welcome to Pilgrim Congregational Church, United Church of Christ in Redding, California's space in the virtual world. We are so glad that you joined us this morning. No matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. And we're glad that you've chosen today to spend some time with us. Before we get into our service, celebrating our third in a series of earth-based creation justice Sundays, I have a few announcements to make. And the first is, there is a new podcast episode out on truth and one coming out on moral truth. I get to be a part of a group of 5 of us, ministers and theological thinkers, are in a podcast called Irenicast. And if that's your thing, take a look at it. I've been really enjoying the conversations we've been having lately. So that has come out and will be coming out. We have annual gathering coming up, and for the Northern California Nevada Conference of the United Church of Christ, which we're a part of, it has been delayed till October, but the business session is still happening, and it's going to happen virtually this month. Contact us for more details. Those of you who know what I'm talking about, you know. We are still accepting offerings and tithes during this time. There should be a description in the link in this YouTube video or on Facebook that can take you to a place where you can donate online. I personally have my bank send something from my bank account to the church, so they send a check for me. I don't have to write one out or anything. And if that's something you'd like getting help set up with, we can help you out. But we are still engaging and giving during this time. And lastly, we are going to do a promotion Sunday for students coming up at the end of this month. Our students are graduating, and some of them are doing virtual graduations. And so whether it's in person at that time or if it's still virtual, we're going to honor our students together and send them off with a blessing. And also, we are putting together a game night for students, 6th grade and up. Be on the lookout for that. Okay, at this time, we welcome our candle lighters to bring us together this morning in worship.
By Shel Silverstein. If you are a dreamer, come in. If you are a dreamer, a wisher, a liar, a hoper, a prayer, a magic bean buyer. If you're a pretender, come sit by my fire, for we have some flax golden tales to spin. Come in, come in.
To be born, a time to die,
a time to plant, a time to reap,
a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, a time to leave. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn.
and
A time for every purpose under heaven.
a time to build up, a time to break down,
a time to dance, a time to mourn,
a time to cast away stones,
a time to
gather stones together. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn.
and a time for every purpose under heaven.
a time to love, a time to hate,
A time of war, a time of peace,
A time you may embrace
a time to refrain
from embracing. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn.
and a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to gain, a time to lose,
a time to rend, a time to sow,
A time for love, a time for hate, a time for peace. I swear it's not too late.
Good morning, Pilgrim kids. This week we're talking about sharing. And I did a little recon and I was thinking about what are some things that you really like to share? And I talked to my boys and I talked to Liam and I asked them what are some things that they really like to share. And it made me start thinking about what I really like to share. And I really like to share my time with you guys and my friends and my family. I really like to share meals with the people that I love and be surrounded by lots of people. But more importantly, I'd like to just share my time with you guys, and that is part of why I have missed you guys all so much. I want you guys to think this week about some things that you like to share. My boys said that they really like to share their bikes and riding bikes with their friends and share watching movies with their friends. Liam said he really likes to share his toys and he likes to share a meal with his friends. So I want you to go forward this week and think about what you like to share and who you like to share it with. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend, enjoying all of this wonderful sunshine, and have a wonderful, wonderful Sunday, and I look forward to seeing you all soon.
Our readings today are from Matthew chapter 14, beginning with the first verse. The stories of the death of John the Baptist and the feeding of the multitude. At that time, Herod the ruler heard reports about Jesus, and he said to his servants, "This is John the Baptist. He has been raised from the dead, and for this reason the powers are at work with him." For Herod had arrested John, bound him, and put him into prison on account of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because John had been telling Herod, "It is not lawful for you to have her." Though Herod wanted to put John to death, he feared the crowd because they regarded John as a prophet. But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before the company, and she pleased Herod so much that he promised on oath to grant her whatever she might ask. Prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me the head of John the Baptist here on a platter." The king was grieved, yet out of regard for his oath and for the guests, he commanded it to be given. He sent and had John beheaded in the prison. The head was brought on a platter and given to the daughter, who brought it to her mother. John's disciples came and took the body and buried it, and then they went and told Jesus. Having heard this, Jesus withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. Going ashore, Jesus saw a great crowd and had compassion for them and cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to Jesus and said, "This is a deserted place and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he told the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, Jesus looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all ate and were filled. And they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who ate were above 5,000 men, besides women and children. Thus ends the reading.
Let's begin with prayer. God, we take this moment to feel the gratitude for the world in which we live. We thank you for these moments that we get to inhabit, to think deeply together. And I ask that the meditations of my heart and the words of my mouth would be pleasing in your sight, our Creator. Amen. Something curious happened in Minnesota at the outset of the pandemic. A non-Minnesotan resident was walking through the grocery store and noticing something strange. As she walked aisle by aisle, she saw one item on each of these shelves that had been completely cleared out. If you're from Minnesota, you probably know why that's the case. But for her, it took a bit to figure it out. I know for us, our grocery stores can be cleaned out in the last couple months. She finally discovered that in Minnesota, when people were preparing to shelter in place, they left the last item of whatever they were buying. They didn't want to be the last person to take it because they wanted it to be there available for anyone who would need it. Even in the midst of scarcity, this sharing triggers something in us, doesn't it? It gives a brief glimpse into a different way of being. And it's that different way of being which is the theme for our 3rd week of Creation Justice. It involves a shift from scarcity to abundance and sharing. This economic, political, religious shift, which is always very spiritual, is not only what our world needs today as we face climate change and wealth inequality, but it's incidentally what we need on a personal level. It's what I need. I will say that the shift from scarcity to abundance involves a mindset, a movement, and a mystery. If that sounds too Pollyanna for you, hang around, because it touches on neuroscience, economics, and sociology, as well as being very grounded in our Christian tradition. It has profound implications for our planet and for us. Matthew 14 is often subtitled Death of John the Baptist and Feeding the 5,000. If you have your Bible, go ahead and pull it out. Maybe dust it off a little. We're doing it this Sunday. If you're online, you can look up Matthew 14 and you'll see what I'm talking about, the subtitles. But this passage in particular could and probably should be titled A Tale of Two Feasts. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Actually, I don't know if that is Tale of Two Cities or Great Expectations. So if you know what that reference is, let me know in the comments. Be kind. Usually people would be able to shout out in the congregation and correct me. The feeding of the 5,000 is told in all four Gospels. In fact, it's the only miracle of Jesus that's recounted in all four. In the three most similar Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, this story is connected. It comes right after this story about Herod. And we can be forgiven if we've never noticed this connection before because they're hardly ever read together. In comparing and contrasting the two, we see a powerful literary metaphor for the spiritual journey we are on as a species and as individuals. I said comparing and contrasting. I've thought really hard about using a whiteboard and actually tried it a few times. But if you're a previous student of mine, you know I can't stop talking once a whiteboard is up front. so I've abandoned the whiteboard. But I'm inviting you to take a look at Matthew 14, to read verses 1 through 21, those two stories, and to contrast them. I'll get us started, and if you have ideas, you can put it in the comments below on this YouTube video, or you can join us at 10:30 for coffee hour every Sunday and share what you've discovered there. On the one hand, we have Herod in verse 1. On the other, in verse 13, we have Jesus. And there's these two different pictures, ways of life that are being painted. Herod is eating, and so is Jesus. There's different emotions involved. Herod is afraid. He's afraid of killing John the Baptist. He's afraid of John the Baptist. He's afraid of what people are thinking when he makes certain decisions. He doesn't want to kill John the Baptist toward the end, but he does it anyway because he's scared of what people would think after he has made that promise. Jesus, on the other hand, is compassionate. He feels compassion. In a very real sense, Herod and his way of being, his banquet. I said banquet. There's thunder. Can you hear that? It's awesome. We have the banquet of Herod on the one hand and the picnic, for lack of a better term, of Jesus on the other. In the book of Mark, not necessarily in Matthew, but in Mark, it's even more striking because Jesus sits down the crowd in groups of 50, in groups of 100, kind of echoing a banquet feast. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Herod's banquet ends in death, literally eating and consuming death, because John the Baptist's head is on a silver platter. And it is raining really hard right now. Jesus, in the wilderness, on the other hand, they're eating bread and fish. And in the Gospel of John, that bread is connected later with the bread of life. So we have Herod banqueting in the center of power in the city. Jesus in the wilderness with poor folks. Herod, his banquet is all about consumption. There is this excess that goes with being royalty. And Jesus, there is a sense of sharing of what little people had. And this shift from scarcity to abundance is so loud. Oh my goodness. It involves a mindset. Neurological studies show scarcity orients the mind powerfully, especially in our early childhoods, but even as we grow older. It's a cruel trap because it develops in us a sense that there will never be enough. If you think about Herod's banquet, there is this need, right? This need to defend what he has and this need for more, but there is never enough. There's never enough food, never enough money, never enough love. And that's a self-fulfilling prophecy for us in our journeys. And that's the myth of the dragon, as Joseph Campbell puts it. Not dragons in general, but the European dragon is one that hides out in a cave. You've probably seen this depicted somewhere. And has hordes of gold and, a maiden sitting on top of the gold, and the dragon's wrapped around all of it. And heroes try to come and free the wealth and free the maiden. And really, it's a picture, a psychological picture of having and not being able to appreciate. Like, the dragon can't make use of human intimacy and love and contact, can't make use of the gold and wealth, but it's hoarding it nonetheless. And we all know this kind of mindset and operation of scarcity. I have a cousin who told a story on a podcast one time about how, they were trying to eat a little bit more mindfully. For some reason, when they get stressed out, they go into this survival mode. And so even though there's enough food, to last, they start eating and eating because they're stressed out and they're operating from this place of scarcity. Why? You're eating, what the heck? What am I doing? Creating artificial scarcity is actually what we do as a society in our desire for more. It's almost as if we cultivate and pay attention to scarcity, that we might grow it and use it. Sometimes this happens illegally, like in California. I don't know if you remember the rolling blackouts in the early 2000s. Turns out I discovered that this was a combination of Enron and PG&E, and they were artificially inflating the price of electricity by shutting down power plants when they didn't need to be shut down and offloading energy to other states. Pretty rough. I remember we cooked beans burning gas on our stove to make them, keeping the fridge shut. Sometimes it's a very legal practice to cultivate scarcity. Like in 2017, Burberry burned $36.5 million worth of clothes. And they are hardly the only company to do such a thing. Louis Vuitton, Nike, H&M, they all do those practices. Car manufacturers, all kinds of companies will destroy product because our market depends on scarcity. When I think about Herod's banquet, I think of cynicism and fear, distrusting, cold, and the politics of death. Whereas Jesus moves his disciples, his followers, from a place of fear, being afraid that the crowds wouldn't be able to eat, moving them to a place of wonder and trust and ultimately stewardship. There is this abundance that is created, but Jesus doesn't feed the crowds. He commands his followers to do so. And so they are supposed to steward this abundance. Side note, the opposite happens in Herod's passage. Herod is beholden to the crowds, right? Herod is not teaching anyone anything. He's not moving anyone forward. And so we come to the concept of movement. There is this movement and growth progression in this tending to the abundance that exists. Not only are we adopting a mindset, we are going through a transformation. Herod doesn't change. In Herod, you hear the echoes of this is just the way that it has to be. This is the way power works. Nobody changed at the feast. Whereas with Jesus, the disciples are changing in the process and becoming stewards. It makes me think of the Appalachian coal miners who are being retrained right now as beekeepers by nonprofits. It's happening right now. Or when the whole world banded together to heal the ozone layer, vowing not only to change the environment out there, but to change themselves. There is a movement. Just this last year, in terms of creation justice, there has been a global youth movement. And more than 1,200 governments declared climate emergencies this last year. Wind has dropped in price by 50% and solar by 85% in the past 10 years. Last May, 186 countries agreed to prevent ocean plastic pollution by reforming their waste management systems. Economies around the world are eliminating plastic, changing the way we eat, and embracing regenerative agriculture. There is a movement happening and afoot away from consumption and toward sustaining and cultivating the abundance of the earth. Even the way we farm is changed by this shift. What if we could shift our thinking about the earth as something to consume, to a biodiversity that is to be cultivated and loved? Ultimately, this leads us to mystery. Abundance begets abundance. There is a tension somewhere between simplicity and abundance, and sharing changes us. What shift will win out in us? That's a real question. And we answer that question when we pass legislation making sure nobody gets left behind. We also answer it when the National Guard is forced to protect Maryland's test kits from the federal government by hiding them in an undisclosed location. Or when we relax environmental laws because we are afraid for our businesses that they won't do well this year. On the other hand, we've saved countless lives. We've given up our security together to embrace life. Let us lean into this and celebrate it. The divine mystery of grace, which Jesus calls the abundant life, is leading us into a new consciousness. We are in the wilderness, aren't we? This is the message for us in the wilderness. This feast, this growing mindset, movement, and mystery is our bread of life. And it has profound consequences for us and for our planet. Before we move to our response hymn, where we're going to sing about Jesus' teaching that God is paying attention and that even when a sparrow falls, God is there, and that we can trust, we can have a basic trust in the world. Before that hymn, I'd like to lead you in a ritual. It's best if we cultivate the abundance of the world, but if we can't even get there, let's at least recognize. Let's recognize that there is enough food for everyone, that there is enough, and we have enough. Go ahead and take a moment to kind of quiet yourself down and just think about your hands for a moment. I heard of one psychologist who said, think about the inside of your hands. What does that feel like? What do you feel? And then feel the other parts of your body. Let it go up your arms. Try to feel what that feels like on the inside. You're just paying attention to your body. And then let that kind of go to your legs, through your whole body. And then once we're sitting and thinking and reflecting on this present moment, just being here in our body, we can tell ourselves that this is enough. That there is no doing or have to or should, but that just being is good. And then we can be present to the world that sustains us. If we can't cultivate all the goodness that we see, surely that's where we're headed. But let's just at first acknowledge it. Amen.
Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart be lonely and long for heaven and home? When Jesus is my portion, my constant friend is He. His eyes on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For His eyes on the sparrow, and I know God's watching me, and I know God's watching me, and I know she's watching me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For His eyes are on the sparrow, and I know God's watching me, and I know He's watching the sparrow, and I know she's watching me. And I know God's watching me.
Stay safe, everybody. God bless.